I'm Judy Thompson. I teach English as a second language, and I love my job. The sweeping changes in English as an international lingua franca, or common language, have affected us all. So yes, education has to change the way we teach English, but native English speakers have to change the way they use English as well. This is new, and we don't like it. We're going to talk about three things today. So English and change. English changes all the time. So what exactly is our problem? The problem is what never changes is humans hate change. Secondly, we're going to talk about the universal simplicity of English, and we're going to bust some myths about English being a difficult language. You'll learn the simple essence of English that is always true. Finally, we're going to talk about the future of English. It is here. It's on our doorstep. It's radically different than anything we've experienced before. English changed without our permission. How are we going to manage that? Here is a really big change that's difficult to accept. British English is no longer the preferred type of English to learn. I can only guess how the British are processing that right now. So this graph represents all native English speakers in the world. There are 350 million people in the world whose first language is English. And the big blue section there, almost 3/4 of native English speakers are in North America. Canada and United States combined make 72%. So Australia's 5% there in yellow, other. South Africa and New Zealand are in the red section there. And the rest are UK, United Kingdom, 17%. So most of the United Kingdom, 16.5%, is regional accents and received pronunciation, RP, the British English we teach in school, 0.05%, less than 1% of native English speakers use the English they teach in textbooks. In fact, this is the Queen's English. The Queen speaks RP, and when this number's getting smaller every day. When she's gone, she's pretty much the last person who speaks that version of English. So people who study RP are studying a language no one actually speaks, and they're never likely to encounter. On the other side, the blue side, general American, Hollywood gets a lot of credit for people choosing to speak American English, but it's a numbers game. You can see the little gray line there, almost bisecting the whole circle. Below that line, 48% of native English speakers speak general American, exactly the same version of English. So half the native English speakers in the world speak the same version of English, and it's general American. So it's fascinating that in the United Kingdom, everyone's born speaking English, but they value their differences. They value their individuality and choose to speak separate dialects. Where in North America, everybody's from somewhere else. And when they come to America, they choose to belong and choose to speak exactly the same English. So it's a numbers game. British English is no longer the preferred type of English to learn. It's the English that I'm speaking now. How do you think the British feel about this? How do you think the British feel about American English? Well, you can probably guess. In 1787, Thomas Jefferson, the American president at the time, used the word belittle. And the British response was, it may be an elegant word in Virginia and even perfectly intelligible, but for our part, all we can do is guess at its meaning. We don't know what you're saying. It's not a British word, so la 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 la, we don't know what you're saying. Here's talent as a vile and barbarous word. Samuel Johnson disparaged glee, jeopardy, and smolder. Progress as a verb. Scientist was a regrettable Americanism, a cheap and vulgar product of transatlantic slang. normalcy, placate, transpire, antagonize, and the list goes on and on. Because these words came from America was grounds enough to detest them. Well, this is confirmation bias at its, I don't want to say best, I'm going to say worst, because the irony is, I'm not sure about belittle, but all the rest of them were British words. So those words were coined in Britain, fell out of currency, and were revitalized in America. These aren't even American words, but the British hate them because they believe they're American. But that was a long time ago, right? That's not happening today, and North Americans would never do that. Sorry, the English attitude towards Americanism is still quite frankly hostile. In 1930, American words and accent are perfectly disgusting. In 1978, during a debate in the House of Lords, if there is a more hideous language on the face of the earth than the American form of English, I should like to know what it is. To this day, you can find authorities in Britain attacking such vile Americanisms as maximize and minimize. Dare I say it? Yes, both of those words are British words. So let's have a look at some of the myths that we hang on to, that are our confirmation bias. When I'm doing this presentation face to face, I ask the audience to raise their hand if they've heard any of these or if they actually believe them. So here we go. English is one of the most difficult languages to learn. Children learn languages faster and more easily than adults. I before E, except after C. When two vowels go walking, sound it out. And then a bunch of grammar stuff. The whole audience has their hand in the air. This is something that we believe. So in fact, and they're all bunk actually, they're all absolute garbage. So English is one of the most difficult languages to learn. In fact, as the boiled down combination of several languages, German, Norse, and French, English is one of the most simple languages. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? We'll look at that a little bit more later. English isn't difficult, it's just taught badly. And that there's a big difference. So it's this again, children learn languages faster and more easily than adults. In fact, this was busted in 1972 or 1973, and several studies since have all proved the same thing. That children don't learn languages faster, they learn languages differently than adults, and adults can learn languages just as fast, just not the way that we teach it. So I before E, except these are two kind of spelling things and pronunciation things. I before E, except after C. Weird, 8, foreign, neighbor, beige, way, sleigh, science. The list goes on and on. If there are hundreds of exceptions, that means it's not a rule. It's not even a good suggestion. So when two vowels go walking, come on, this has occurred to you. You have seen vowels together and looked and said, you know what, the first one isn't doing a talking. I know that this is flicked through your head. Yeah, believe yourself. Believe yourself. You are right and the myths are wrong. Sound it out. Here it is, the single most destructive sentence in the history of education. English is a non-phonetic language, which is the problem. That's the problem. It's not that it's difficult, it's easy. It's that letters don't represent sounds, and that's the problem. Ignoring it has made the problem even bigger. So are you looking at this little sound? What sound do U, V make together? Go ahead, pronounce them. What sound is it? How would you spell that? How would you spell that word? Of. Yep, O-F. That's O-F. English spelling doesn't make sense, and that's the problem. And English education has managed it. Well, hasn't managed it at all. I was going to say badly, but. So we keep these myths in our vernacular to make it okay for us to teach English badly. And this, how would you like to graduate from TESOL, be a teacher of English as a second language? I'm looking at the second one here. Children learn languages faster and more easily than adults. So you've paid for your undergraduate degree, you've paid for a certificate, to teach adults, and you walk out into the world knowing you're never going to be successful. You are never going to teach adults because they just don't learn language. What kind of a place is this for our industry to stand, especially since none of it's true? What is going on with that? Who made this stuff up? Where did it originate? It was two nobodies, actually. In 1476, William Caxton, who was a businessman, thought he could make some money by writing English down. It was a great idea. Fortunately, English had been spoken for 1,000 years at this time and used more than 40 sounds. But to make the most money and do the fastest, cheapest way that he could, he took an alphabet that already existed. He took the Latin alphabet with 26 letters and just randomly started spelling things. So he made a mess, and other printers popped up all over the neighborhood who also wanted to make money. And they added and subtracted letters to justify their margins to make their documents look pretty for marketing, so people would buy them. Spelling was so random, William Shakespeare, who lived at this time, wrote his own name 14 different ways. None of them is the way we spell it today. By 1603, society said, this is just not going to work. We have to standardize spelling. So they took all of Caxton's mistakes and put them in the BBM, the Big Book of Mistakes, and now we call it the dictionary. So look it up in the dictionary. Sounded out is the cruelest, most destructive phrase ever uttered because they aren't in the dictionary. What William Caxton did was separate writing from speaking. Learning to speak English is fine and easy. Learning to write English is more challenging. Both are fine, but you can't do one from the other. You can't speak English from reading it. You can't write English from speaking it. 1762, another nobody, Robert Louth. He was a clergyman, and grammar was his hobby. So, as was common back in the day, they just rubbed out English or Latin in the title of grammar. Who made this stuff up? Where did all this garbage come from? It was two nobodies, actually. In 1476, William Caxton was a businessman, and he thought he could make some money by writing English down. It was a great idea. Up until this point, for 1,000 years actually, English had been only a spoken language, and it used about 40 sounds, a little more than 40 sounds. The problem was he grabbed the Latin alphabet, 26 letters, and it didn't fit. He made a mess. He made English spelling random. Other printers popped up in his neighborhood. They also wanted to make money. Every printer printed every word differently. They added and subtract letters to justify their margins to make their documents look pretty for marketing in order to sell them. Spelling was so random, William Shakespeare, who lived in this time, he wrote his own name 14 different ways, and none of them is the way that we spell it today. 1603, society said this will never do. We have to standardize spelling. They put all of William Caxton's mistakes in the BBM, the Big Book of Mistakes, and we called it the dictionary. So sounded out is the most cruel and destructive phrase in the English language because William Caxton actually separated writing from speaking. And there it is. Look it up at the dictionary. They aren't in the dictionary. Speaking words aren't in the dictionary. Writing and speaking are completely separate. You can't read English from speaking it, and you can't speak English from reading it. And that is the problem with English. 1762, Robert Louth, another nobody. Pretty much the same story. He destroyed grammar in exactly the same way. It was very common back in that day to just take the word Latin out of the Latin grammar title and substitute English instead. So he wrote a short introduction to Latin English grammar, and it went viral. So these weren't the rules for English grammar at all. Bill Bryson said, trying to fit English into Latin grammar rules is like trying to play baseball using football rules. So there they are, two nobodies, the genesis of our spelling and grammar and dysfunctional education system. We've been copying them for hundreds of years. So what now? It's not that William Caxton destroyed spelling and that Robert Louth misrepresented grammar. It's that we copied them. So my parents and my teachers gave me wrong information that their parents and their teachers gave them, that their parents and their teachers that gave them, and so on and so on. So now it's time to open our minds and change our attitudes and maybe just re-examine some of these things that we held to be true. So education has to change. The internet outed it. Internet outed everyone because it provides transparency and demands accountability. Education's had no accountability. So it's not that it wasn't a fantastic business model to teach things that aren't true, take everybody's money and waste everybody's time. It was fantastically lucrative. Look at the profits from the publishing industry and institutions. It isn't that, it's just that party is now over. So we aren't going to fix education now, but we are going to look at it differently. How does all of this affect native English speakers? The second thing that we were going to talk about in our agenda was the miraculous simplicity of English. So there's a pattern that runs through Old, Middle, Modern English, and beyond. The essence of English is the same in Irish, Australian, South African, Canadian, American. How is it that Americans understand Australians and Canadians understand Scottish, where the sounds are a little bit different, the vocabulary is a little bit different, the expressions are different, and we still understand each other? What's at the bottom of that that's so simple? Every toddler figures out the patterns of English on their own. In fact, I think the only place that you don't learn to speak English is in school. And we already covered why that is. So humans are pattern-seeking, meaning-making machines. This is how the brain works. This is Rita Baker. She's the greatest mind in ESL in the world today. She did figure out what the rules are for English grammar. So if you want to know, find out from Rita Baker and the global approach. Before we talk about English, let's talk about essence. What is the essence of Christmas tree? What makes a Christmas tree a Christmas tree? I think we can all agree that both of these pictures are Christmas trees. These are also Christmas trees, but what is it about them that makes them Christmas trees? So it isn't the material, they're not even trees. One's beer bottles, one's wine bottles. It isn't the decorations, it isn't the color, but those are still clearly Christmas trees. What makes a Christmas tree a Christmas tree? How about these? Are these both Christmas trees? I would say yes. I'm a much faster yes to the one on the left because of culture, because of Charlie Brown's Christmas. That says Christmas tree to me. There's the essence right there, the pine tree and the decoration. On the right, it looks more like a cactus with Christmas decorations on it, but I get it. I'm not going to argue if people accept that as a Christmas tree. I get it. How about this? Is this a Christmas tree? When I do this presentation live, unequivocally, the audience says, yes, this is a Christmas tree. And if I take the stand away, if there's no stand, it's suddenly just a pine tree. And if there's a stand, it's a Christmas tree. What makes a Christmas tree a Christmas tree? Well, it's kind of cultural. It's a little bit of a shape. It's a little bit of a feeling. It's a little bit seasonal. It's a cultural concept. Makes Christmas tree. There is no real definition. So how about one? What is the essence of one? Uno, ein, one. It's not a symbol. How old are you, honey? And they hold a finger up in the air. That represents one. There it is in other languages. So it's not a word or a symbol or a finger. It's a concept. It's a number. It's an amount. One is an amount. So what is the essence of English? Drum roll, please. It's word stress. It's the thing that makes banana a word and banana, banana, banana are not words. One syllable is higher, longer, and louder than all of the others. English is a stress-based language. If the one critical element is missing, English isn't intelligible. So if word sounds are perfect, grammar is perfect, pronunciation's perfect, and there's no word stress, there's no intelligibility. And this is what's wrong with call centers. Arabic, Hindi, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, these languages are sound-based. Every sound is equally important. If they get one sound wrong, and I learned this the hard way. When I was in Korea, I was going kamsamida, kamsamida. I thought I was saying thank you. And a student pointed out to me, asked me, what are you saying? And I said thank you. And he said, oh, it's kamsahamida. Kamsahamida is thank you. Not only was I missing one sound, they couldn't even guess from kamsamida what I was saying. That's what a sound-based language is. English isn't. We rely on one and only one thing. It's that stress syllable. It's so powerful if the stress syllable's there and nothing else. No grammar, no complete words. The message is still clear. I'll show you what I mean. Here we go. What does this little monkey want? Mama, tata, wawa. Every mother in the audience and most of the dads, quite frankly, just said she wants water. Mama, tata, wawa. No grammar, no spelling, not one complete word, and the message is clear. No meaning is lost. Context, body language, and word stress deliver messages in English. That's the essence of successful conversation. The third thing that we wanted to talk about today was the future of English. So the biggest change in centuries is here. The future is here, and it's going to serve us to look backwards a little bit to see how that fits in. So 450, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes were German-speaking people. They landed on the British Isles, conquered the natives, and it became England. A few centuries later, the Vikings arrived, fighting, of course, but there was no winner this time, and the German and the Norse put their culture and language together, and it became a new language. It became Old English. It was the beginning of things like two words that mean exactly the same thing in English, two or more words, really, skin and hide, anger and wrath, sick and ill, blah, blah, blah. 500 years later, William the Conqueror conquered. He spoke French. When French was added to the mix, became Middle English. And then 1476, William Caxton, Doomsday. We talked about him. So there it is. English had been spoken for 1,000 years, and there it is, the red line at the top. William Caxton wrote it down, made a horrible mess, separated spoken from written English with a dysfunctional alphabet, and it ushered in modern English. So the alphabet, spelling, grammar, composition, punctuation, literature, everything that we learned in school about English was actually only about the bottom line. And with no bridge to the top line, spoken English, students have wondered for how they can study English for years and years and years and never get better at speaking. It's because nobody ever taught them and because they're unconnected. Well, 1981, so 1476 to 1981, 500 years almost to the year, is the launch of Microsoft. And the impact on English as an international language and the language of technology is immeasurable. But for sure, the new era of English started, and it started 40 years ago. How does this affect us? So almost halfway into the switch from modern English to international English, the English-speaking world looks like this. So there's almost 2 billion people that use English, whether it's a first or a second or a third or a fourth or a learned language. Of those, there's us, the 350 million people who use it as a first language, native speakers. And look at that. Non-native speakers outnumber native speakers 4 or 5 to 1. Most conversations in English happen between two non-native speakers. So the business of the world, Argentina sells coffee to China using English. Very, very simplified English. How much does it cost? When is it going to be delivered? How much are we going to buy? Driven by context, gestures and important words. So modern English is whether out of date, and it's getting squished out of date. We thought this was hysterical when it was the British who'd lost their toehold as the preferred language to be learned. But guess what? American English is finished as well. It's not so funny now. But whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them, that's modern English. Shakespeare spoke modern English. Modern English is so abstract and so difficult, native speakers are no longer invited to international meetings. Native speakers are the problem. Native speakers are unintelligible. And it's the expressions. English is too abstract. The most abstract form of English that I know of is Cockney. And if you're not born in that part of England, in London, you can't really understand them. But we've incorporated Cockney into modern English. So brass tacks, let's get down to brass tacks, is about facts. Put up your dukes. Dukes is from Duke of York. And your hand looking like a fork, comparing your hand to a fork, and hands to dukes. Put up your dukes, forks, hands, put up your fists. I'm telling you, who could jump into this? Who could learn this? They don't have to bother, they're not going to. Bread, referring to bread as money, the breadwinner, and can you lend me some bread? Who makes the bread is from bread and honey, that's Cockney. Blow a raspberry is a sound. Yeah, that's from raspberry tart, and it's imitating an unpleasant sound. I'm not going, an unpleasant body function. I'm not going to give you any more information than that. So native speakers intimidate non-native speakers who communicate perfectly until we arrived. I knew this as a teacher. My literacy students or my intermediate, it didn't matter. When I came back from coffee break, they were all chatting away to each other in the room, and I'd step into the room and they would all stop. And I thought, how do you guys speak successfully without me? Aren't I the glue that holds all of your conversation together? And the bitter truth is I'm not. I was the impediment. To use our Christmas tree analogy, non-native speakers, English learners, are the Christmas tree on the left, the bare bones. What is the essence of Christmas tree? They use the essence of English, and it works very, very well. Native speakers, on the other hand, are perfectly represented by the Christmas tree on the right. We are all baubles and ribbons and extraneous adjectives and cultural expressions, and we're out of date. We have to simplify the way that we speak English if we want to communicate with that great big pink world, and they have a lot of money, so we do want to communicate with them. First, we have to drop off some of our baubles. I'm not advocating we teach English like this. I'm not there yet, but we should understand international English uses simplified word lists, less than 2,000 words, simplified grammar. So native speakers use 208, around there, grammar rules and exceptions. International English uses 10. So there's no S in the third person singular. That still works. You go to the bank, adding S to non-count nouns. Pronouns are vague. Agreement isn't necessary. Mary has report. His report is here. Articles are loose or non-existent. I'm not advocating this. I'm just telling you that this works. So modern English has a very Victorian right and wrong, good and bad orientation. And international English doesn't have that. They have, do you understand me or not? Pronouns are elastic. There are absolutely no baubles, absolutely no idioms, expressions, or slang. There's the outline. I know you must be cringing to be facing these changes in English, but I promise you, it's not as bad as you're thinking. International English is pure and guileless. I had a beautiful new student from Sri Lanka. The rest in my literacy class, the rest of the students were working on something. She came up to my desk, looked me in the eye and said, "Teacher, you me washroom? And I said, sure, go ahead. She wasn't at the door before I thought, what the heck happened there? Everything I'd been taught to teach was missing. The words were wrong, the pronunciation was wrong, the grammar was wrong, and the message was clear and seamless. It changed my whole world. I had to figure out how conversation really works because it wasn't what I was taught to teach. A Croatian student said to me, teacher, why you no married? Now, if English were his first language, he would be asking me if I was gay. But it isn't. He just wants to know, because you're so great, why aren't you married? So I answered him, I've been married twice, in fact. So I was answering, no, I'm not gay. I was answering a question he wasn't even asking, because that's how complicated native speakers make conversation. And he said, oh, it's because of you. I think you're difficult. Well, of course, he's exactly right. I am difficult. But you can't take offense to this. People say, oh, I like it when people are honest to me. Well, good, because honest is all international speakers know. They're not sophisticated enough for anything else. They're just the pure, unvarnished truth. I believe it's a beautiful thing. That whole class failed their final exams. At the end of the term, every student failed every exam. And I sat them down at the end and I said, guys, what's going on? I know that you know this stuff. I know you know this material. What's happening here? Can you guess? Do you know what they said? They said, we don't want to leave you. We don't want to go to the next class. What a statement. That is the most loving and beautiful thing anybody's never said to me. A student leaving that class said, without you, I am less. So native speakers, it's up to us. We are already bilingual. We modify our speaking to speak to our spouse, our children, our boss. We speak to everyone in different ways. So the way that we have to modify our speaking for international speakers is to be mindful of our expressions. Not too many adjectives, simplify your language, don't use such big words. It's a bit of a learning curve, but it's worth it. So English changed without our permission, and it's not going back. English is simpler than you could possibly have imagined. We just were teaching it wrong. We were teaching it badly. It's not difficult at all. Conversation is now every participant's responsibility. And we get to choose how we are going to be about the changes. So we can put our hands over our ears, la, 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 I don't know what you're saying. We can ignore it and deny it and step away of the multicultural scene. We can be angry about it. We can be gracious about it. But mostly, I want you to see the beauty in it. It's here to stay. I want you to embrace it. I'm Judy Thompson of Thompson Language Center. I live in Niagara Falls. It's been my absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you very much for listening. Without you, I am less.